President, I think it's, after listening to the majority leader's comments, I think it's worth taking 5 minutes to recall how we got here. You know, it's ironic to me that people give speeches here on the floor of the Senate about their support for Israel. And there's no doubt Israel is involved in an existential fight with Iran and Iranian proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah, the Houthi rebels, the Shia militias in Syria and Iraq. But the House passed an Israel aid package on November the 2nd. Israel was attacked October the 7th. The House acted on November the 2nd. And the majority leader, who's the only one who can schedule a vote on anything here on the Senate floor, has done nothing to help our best ally and friend in the Middle East, the state of Israel. Nothing. And he's insisted that we package together aid to Ukraine, aid to the Indo-Pacific, and there's been endless discussions about a border bill, which I'll come to in a moment. But this problem that we're running into is one of his own creation. He could decide to take up these bills individually, knowing that the House has already passed an Israel aid bill, and then have the Senate take it up and pass that bill. And then we can turn to the other issues that are vitally important to our national security and deserve fulsome debate and an open amendment process. That's the question my friend from Mississippi was trying to ask the majority leader, but he decided to leave the floor without responding to that, giving me some doubt as to the sincerity of his commitment to have an open amendment process and actually restore the Senate to its previously held reputation as the world's greatest deliberative body. Nobody can call us that now with a straight face. And I understand that the majority leader is trying the best he can to help the Republican Party. He gives advice freely as to what Republicans should do. But the fact of the matter is, we have no confidence, zero confidence, that the Biden administration will enforce the law when it comes to the border. That's been the case for the last 3 years, resulting in historically high numbers, 300,000 people a month showing up at the border only to be ushered into the interior by Biden open border policies that either people claim asylum and are released into the interior, perhaps never to be heard from again, or they're released on parole. Catch and release is the policy of the Biden administration and congressional Democrats. That has proven to be a powerful magnet for illegal immigration. People literally coming from all around the world because they know they can make it into the country because President Biden and Senate Democrats have laid out the welcome mat. So you'll have to forgive me when I note the fake outrage, the phony messaging that we hear from Democrats about this border negotiation. Yes, it's true that we hope to come up with something credible, and on our side of the aisle, Senator Langford from Oklahoma has done a heroic and a thankless job of trying to come up with a negotiated package. But the fact of the matter is the package includes catch and release still, providing additional or continuing incentives for people to come to the country illegally, knowing they'll be released into the interior, and it does nothing to stop the Biden administration from abusing something called parole, which that means in order to avoid bad press, in order to avoid embarrassing TV pictures of an overwhelmed border, They simply just release people into the interior of the country for 2 years and give them a work permit. Are you kidding me? They now claim to be the defenders of the border and for border security? What a joke. What a joke. And it's a bad joke. We know as a result of Biden border policies supported day in and day out by our Democratic colleagues for the entire time that President Biden has been in office, have resulted in roughly 7 million migrants being released into the interior of the United States and 1.7 million gotaways, is what the Border Patrol calls them. People evading law enforcement for good reason, I suspect. Either they're transporting illegal drugs into the interior of the United States, or maybe, just maybe, out of that 1.7 million, there's a few people who are on the terrorist watch list. We know the Border Patrol's detained roughly 170, I think at last count, people on the terrorist watch list. That's the people they know about. But they can't tell us how many more people on the terrorist watch list are among those gotaways, endangering the safety and security of the United States. It took 19 people to kill 3,000 Americans on 9/11. What about 1.7 million gotaways? We don't know whether these are serial criminals. We don't know whether they're transporting drugs. We don't know whether they're terrorists. We don't know anything about them, and frankly, President Biden doesn't care. And neither do our Senate colleagues who've done zero, nothing, nada, to deal with this problem. So you'll have to forgive me if I find their fake outrage unconvincing. And then there are the 108,000 Americans who died of drug overdoses last year. That's also part of the Biden open border policies. I have been wearing since April of last year a rubber bracelet given to me by a father of a young woman who lost her life because she took a pill that she thought was relatively innocuous, but it was laced with fentanyl. Her name was Sienna. Her father asked me to wear this rubber bracelet. It says, "One pill can kill." Well, 71,000 Americans died last year as a result of fentanyl poisoning, including young women like Sienna, who took something they thought was relatively innocuous, which was a counterfeit pill laced with fentanyl, and not waking up the next morning. And then perhaps the greatest untold story. We've tried to tell the story. The New York Times has written about this, is the hundreds of thousands of unaccompanied children who've been placed with sponsors in the interior of the United States who've come across the border. They've been attracted like a magnet to our border, and under Biden policies been released to sponsors, many of whom aren't even immediate relatives. And the Biden administration has simply lost track of them. They can't tell you whether the 300,000 children are going to school, whether they're getting the health care they need, whether they're being trafficked for sex, whether they're being forced into involuntary labor. The New York Times has written at least 2 times that I recall about forced labor conditions for these migrant children. Forced into illegal, dangerous labor. And the New York Times tried to call some of these sponsors to see if they knew about what these children were doing, these children who were turned over to the care of these sponsors by the Biden administration under their current policies. In 85,000 cases, there was no answer. So the truth is, under the Biden border policies, under the policies supported by all of our Democratic colleagues now who are demonstrating fake outrage about the failure of the current border bill, they simply don't care. They don't care about these children. They don't care about the families grieving lost ones as a result of the illegal drugs that stream across the border, carried by the very criminal organizations that smuggle people from around the world who show up at our border and are released into the interior of the United States. What greater incentive can you think of for attracting illegal immigration than the open border policies which tragically result in the death of innocent Americans, including innocent children, and losing 300,000 children placed with sponsors? The Biden administration doesn't care. So let me just say that when the majority leader takes off his hat as the majority leader of this great institution and puts on his hat as a Democratic partisan, making political attacks against the very people who he's hoping will support the legislation that he's advocating for, aid to Ukraine, this is not a good day for this institution. And it strikes me as a bizarre tactic when you know who the 100 people are who are going to be voting on the legislation that he's going to put on the floor. And the fact that the majority leader walks away from a legitimate question by our colleague, the senator from Mississippi, that asked whether there'll be an opportunity for debate and votes on amendments, he won't even answer the question. This is the same majority leader that put this bill on the floor that we'll be voting on at 1 o'clock and said, okay, we released the text that on Sunday night, in 72 hours, senators are going to have to vote on it. These are detailed, complex negotiations that have been taking place for months now. And the majority leader won't even give the Senate and senators time to digest it and understand it. I think that tells you all you need to know about his motives. This is all about partisan political attacks and posturing leading up to the November 2024 election. President Biden's guilty of some of the same posturing. He said, this is rich. After Secretary Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security, has said time and time again under oath, the border is secure. Well, we knew that was a lie because our eyes did not deceive us. We could see what was happening at the border. We could listen to Mayor Adams in New York City, the mayor of Chicago, governors around the country saying, we're being inundated by migrants coming across the border. And it's going to, in the case of Mayor Adams, he said it's going to destroy New York City, even though they are a self-designated sanctuary city. Well, all of that's fallen on deaf ears for the last 3 years. And the Senate Majority Leader and the President of the United States think that the American people are so dumb that they haven't seen what's been going on the last 3 years. They have resisted every single effort on our part to secure the border, to halt this tsunami of illegal immigration and illegal drugs. They have resisted all of it. And now, the majority leader would have you believe that he's had a conversion. This is Saul on the road to Damascus. But I don't believe it. And I don't believe the American people will believe it, because their common sense Their very eyes and ears tell them something different, and that is that the Biden administration, Democrats in the Senate and the Senate Majority Leader, who came out here crying crocodile tears over the failure of the border negotiations, they know it's not true. The American people will not be deceived by this transparent political pitch suggesting that now they are the champions of border security. The President of the United States has every tool he needs to secure the border. The laws that are in effect now are the same laws that were in effect when President Trump was in office, and the numbers were dramatically different. In fact, President Biden's numbers of people coming across the border have exceeded the number that came during the entire 8 years of the Obama administration and the entire 4 years of the Trump administration. So, Mr. President, I know there are others here, including my friend, the Republican leader, who are prepared to speak, so I'll sit down. But I just couldn't help myself sitting here listening to what the Majority Leader was trying to sell, which is so patently ahistorical, false, and is clearly just partisan political rhetoric trying to improve what is a very, very damaged reputation when it comes to dealing with our national security and the border.